The Silent Hill franchise is noted as one of the most influential horror titles in the video game industry, sitting comfortably next to Resident Evil. And while that has a focus on survival mechanics along with searching for key items to progress forward, Silent Hill on the other hand is focused on psychological horror. This makes it a very creative and standout title. It has opened up discussion of what each element in the design process means in the grand scale of the story, often connected to a major character. Starting back in 1999 on the PlayStation 1, Silent Hill is considered one of the biggest titles in the video game industry's horror genre. At that time, Resident Evil was just getting into its sequels. The two share some similarities in the horror genre when it comes to mechanics and storytelling, but the approach is very different. Without a doubt, most horror games wouldn't be around without Silent Hill due to its captivating concept, design, and approach to mysterious storytelling, where there's almost no clear answers. In fact, it's pretty crazy how much lore there is to dive into when exploring Silent Hill as a whole. Most of these elements are what Silent Hill 2 is praised for, a game that is often still talked about to this day, due to its well-constructed characters, art design, monsters, and character development, or regression in some cases. As tempting as it is to jump all the way to Silent Hill 2 for a discussion, it would be unfair to not talk about the first game, a much better place to start. Not just because we wouldn't have Silent Hill 2 without it, but because it is the foundation of future titles within the industry, such as Cry of Fear, Evil Within, and Lost in Vivo. Not to mention the sheer limitation in technology for video games back in 1999. Silent Hill 1 is pretty impressive when considering the time factor. We'll cover familiar territory on this channel: the art design, sound and music, gameplay mechanics, and lastly, the story. My name is Arsenal. Let's take a look at Silent Hill 1 and what makes it a unique experience.
You from around here? Why don't you tell me what happened?
I'm looking for my daughter. She's only 7. Short, black hair.
The phones are all dead, and the radio too. From what I can tell, something bizarre's going on. Before you pull the trigger, know who you're shooting. And don't do it unless you have to. And don't go blasting me by mistake.
Everyone seems to have disappeared. And it's snowing out, this time of year. Something's gone seriously wrong. Did you see those monsters? Have you ever seen such aberrations? Ever even heard of such things? You and I both know creatures like that don't exist.
Yeah. It's like this is all some kind of bad dream.
Yeah, a living nightmare.
I've been expecting you. You want the girl, right?
The girl? You're talking about Cheryl.
Strength must overcome petty desire, childish sleep talk. Believe the evidence of your eyes. This is beyond my abilities. Only you can stop it now.
Cheryl!
You want to get yourself killed? Get out of here.
Cheryl is my daughter. I will save her no matter what.
Beside the music and sound effects, Silent Hill thrives on its art direction. This includes the town itself and the creatures that inhabit it. The one word I would use to describe all of Silent Hill 1 is that it's abnormal in almost every way possible. There's more to Silent Hill than just having the story take place in an empty town, then slapping a fog machine into it and throwing some monsters into it. There's more meat to the art direction than that. In fact, the fog's not exactly abnormal since the town is surrounded by a lake. The PlayStation 1's limitations are obviously noticeable in this age of technology of 2024, but it is impressive how Silent Hill 1 looks when considering those limitations. The fog obscuring the player's view is almost claustrophobic as the sounds of enemies creep in. In a way, it's like the veil of night blocking your field of view, just the opposite with the fog in the daytime. It's unsettling having your view obscured, like a sense being taken from you as some kind of oppressive force just sits there waiting to take more from you once nighttime comes. Here's a quote from the director on the making of Silent Hill, talking about the art direction of Silent Hill's story.
開発するにあたって開発当初から掲げたコンセプトが2つありまして、1つ目はゲームの世界観的なものなんですけど、アメリカンモダンホラーの小説に表されているような世界観をゲームで再現するということを目標にしていました。もう一点ですね、本能に訴える恐怖感というものを表現したいと思いました。特に今回は光と闇の演出、また昼ですと霧が街に立ち込めて視界の効かないところから見えないところから怪物が現れるんじゃないかとか、そういった本能的に訴える恐怖というものを表現していました。
Creating an atmosphere that can come across as uncomfortable is paramount for a horror game, and Silent Hill 1 has that in spades. Then there's the snow, just to add more abnormality to Silent Hill's environment.
So maybe you can tell me what's going on.
I really can't say. I was taking a nap in the staff room. When I woke up, it was like this. Everyone seems to have disappeared. And it's snowing out, this time of year. Something's gone seriously wrong.
Unlike the movie, where it is ash and more focused on a fire-based environment. Sometimes the two get muddled together. Some people think a small town called Centralia is the Silent Hill of today, due to the inspiration it had for the movie. It's even confirmed by the art director himself, Masahiro Ito, that it's just snow. I think the snow is one of those environmental details that has little to no explanation. It's strange and yet captivating. I'd summarize it like this. Some plants wither and die in winter only to grow again in the next cycle, since winter is usually seen as the last season in a year's cycle. A tale of death and rebirth, so to speak. A theory that would fit when taking a look at the story of Silent Hill 1. Then there's the other world, as it's called by some of the characters. Everything changes in the art direction once that siren goes off.
What's this? Oh.
The snow disappears, or melts probably in this case. The walls and doors become rusted, chains hang from the ceilings with barbed wire decorations. Oh, I love what you've done with the place. And metallic floors to illustrate something akin to a prison in hell, as blood stains the floor and walls. If there's a darker, more nightmarish part of Silent Hill, it's visualized front and center with the Otherworld, a nightmare that won't end until you progress the story forward, since there's no clear way to wake up. Harry, our protagonist, often thinks he was dreaming in several instances, and once you really dive into the story is where the nightmare details become literal.
Was I dreaming? I just don't get it. It's like this is all some kind of bad dream.
Yeah, a living nightmare.
Was I dreaming? I met this nurse, Lisa. It's like I was there, but not really. It's all a blur, like some kind of hallucination, you know? Where am I?
Harry.
Lisa? Then I'm in the hospital?
You were having a bad dream.
Was I? Was that another dream? Did I pass out again?
What is with this town?
This may sound really off the wall, but listen to me. You've got to believe me. I haven't gone crazy, and I'm not fooling around. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. But but now I know I'm not. It's not me. This whole town. It's being invaded by the other world. By a world of someone's nightmarish delusions come to life. Little by little, the invasion is spreading, trying to swallow up everything in darkness.
Let's take a look at the creatures of Silent Hill 1, of which there are a few with some interesting names. The Air Screamer, Groaner, Grey Child, Creeper, Romper, and Puppets, just to name a few. Some of these creatures in the Fog world change to a more horrendous version in the Otherworld, making them tougher and more vile. A showcase of how powerful the Otherworld's influence is in Silent Hill. It's only until the player gets into the third half of the game that more creepy enemies show up, alluding to what may have happened to the rest of the people that lived in Silent Hill. All of these elements in the art direction are tied to a character we hear about and discover more of in the grand scale of the story, Alessa Gillespie. Due to her supernatural powers, the creatures and the worlds we travel in are manifested by her. More specifically, the creatures are tied to books Alessa read in school, and her personal fears. One of the boss encounters lends this theory some weight, the Split Head. There is a book that players can read. It's a story about a hunter and a lizard. The hunter defeats the lizard by shooting an arrow into the lizard's mouth, as the rest of it is armored. This is the same solution on how to defeat the Split Head boss. As for the fears, I can only surmise that some of them are from abuse and a troubled childhood. But I don't want to point any fingers anywhere. Stupid bitch. To find more detail on the two worlds that collide in Silent Hill, I looked into what answers were provided by the development team. The best way to find answers is from the official guidebook. It provides some answers about the Silent Hill town and story. Quote, "Why does the town suddenly become dark? Even in the nightmare world, there is a cycle. It becomes night on a number of occasions as Harry moves about the town. For the sake of convenience, this will be referred to as the right side and reverse side in this book. These changes occur because there is a cycle in the world of Alessa's nightmares, which envelops the town, in the same way that a person normally repeats REM sleep and non-REM sleep in regular cycles while he or she is sleeping. When the nightmare world approaches a deeper darkness, a phenomenon occurs in which light is almost completely taken away, and the world shifts into an even deeper nightmare as the cycle shifts again." Unquote. So with that information, neither world is considered a reality, but rather a supernatural abnormality, pretty much making a literal nightmare and not a metaphorical one. It's with this kind of information that I like to think of Silent Hill as a character and not a location. It wants something from you, depending on the trauma that can be used as nourishment. This is what makes Silent Hill so captivating in its art direction. There's a reason for everything in its design, environment, and atmosphere, yet there's not always an answer in some cases. Sometimes that's good for the horror genre, fear of the unknown, so to speak. A unique and creative approach for a psychological horror title. Some of the locations are where the developers pull some mind games on the player, with some well-crafted and well-timed scare tactics. One that I particularly liked was at the elementary school in the Otherworld, where it shifts the player's location on a specific door. The other sequences I would recommend experiencing on your own, as it really helps with immersing into the game's atmosphere, something that is perfectly mixed with the overall music and sound effects. When talking about Silent Hill, it's inevitable for the music and sound effects to come up in discussion. Akira Yamaoka is the name you'll hear most often when it comes to the sound of Silent Hill, an element to the IP that has become its own brand over the years, Silent Hill 2's soundtrack being the most noted of the franchise music.
I got a letter. The name on the envelope said Mary.
As for the first game, the soundtrack isn't as big as its sequel, and that's because most of the tracks are ambience effects. Only a few are similar to Silent Hill 2's powerful mood-setting music. Regardless, when the music in Silent Hill 1 is effective, it gets the job done in crucial story points. For example, the very first song that plays when starting the game. An eerie intro from a guitar leading to a musical theme that displays a deep fall into the depths of Silent Hill's dark town. It sets the stage as to what story the player is getting into. A majority of tracks in Silent Hill play a part in the town's overall creepy atmosphere, especially the heavy industrial tracks of the Otherworld, an aggressive attempt to make players uncomfortable. The one way I would describe the sound of Silent Hill is distorted melancholy, and that is because the feeling the music evokes is the personification of uncomfortable isolation. Another way to describe the town of Silent Hill. Empty and deserted, but there's a history underneath all the fog and bloodstains. It's been well documented that Akira used audio samples to create the sounds of Silent Hill, a testament to his talents considering the technology around that time. It's not too different from using stock images in Adobe Photoshop or stock footage for a video in something like Adobe Premiere. How you twist and mold it to your intent determines the overall execution. Additionally, the sound quality of the PlayStation 1 mixes surprisingly well for the sound effects of Silent Hill, supporting the surreal abnormality elements. Some of the sounds coming from the monsters really adds a disturbing part to its appearance. Lastly, there's the radio given to the player near the start of the game. It gives off static noise anytime a monster is nearby.
Radio. What's going on with that radio?
Add that to the fog obscuring the player's view or the other side's darkness caving in, and you get a feeling of uncomfortable preparation. It's safe to say that without the music, the tone would not be the same, and that element of fear wouldn't be as strong. A feeling that is at its strongest on your first blind playthrough experience. Less is more would be the best way to describe the mechanics of Silent Hill, not too complicated and easy to understand. If you've played the old classic Resident Evil games, then the tank controls will be pretty easy to get used to. If you're not into tank controls, well, I don't know what to tell you. The camera follows the player in third person for the most part. One button can be used to look ahead or reposition the camera in order to get a better viewpoint. Speaking of the camera, there's some really impressive camera angles throughout the game that gives the atmosphere an edge and the creepy factor, plus the camera use in certain scenes acts as a unique art form. Some angles work really well for a horror experience, as they make it look like a POV of something watching you. There's rarely ever a time where the player ends up fighting the camera. You can rely on the sound of damage indicators when using a ranged weapon, as the monsters will respond with some sound effect. Also, I got to mention that having no HUD in the game really helps with the atmosphere. The inventory carries all the information players will need. Health status labeled from green to red, ammo count, and the map. The usual stuff with an easy visual to follow. Only reason I mention this is because the HUD isn't something to take for granted, since there's still a possibility of completely useless and absolutely difficult to follow user interfaces. Other than that, the combat is definitely outdated. It's not Silent Hill's strongest aspect. Some weapons have a specific animation, so you'll only find out if it's effective against smaller enemies by trial and error. Being able to move forward and backwards while shooting is neat, but not as reliable as it sounds. It feels clunky and slow when there's a lot of fast-moving enemies in the open areas of Silent Hill. The stomp attack to deal heavy damage is only learned by experience, or through a guide. I only learned about it through playing Silent Hill 2 for a past video. Learning about these mechanics from another main story character in a more fleshed out way could easily remedy that problem. Alternatively, since the ranged weapons have limited ammunition, there's a few melee weapons to use that could help players save up on supplies. Here is where the combat's age starts to really show. Most of the melee weapons don't work well at all. It wasn't until one melee weapon changed my opinion, the hammer.
And the next trick is called the hospital flip. Why is it called a hospital flip?
In a past video, I brought up how weapons can only affect a horror game's effectiveness in being scary by how powerful said weapon is. The hammer counts in most situations. I have never felt more safe with this thing catching more than one monster in the middle of an attack animation. Damn, that felt good. It's the one weapon I would recommend finding at all cost, just for its sheer power and damage. That being said, it doesn't counter all monsters, so I am glad to say it's not a complete problem solver. Needing to use a different weapon in the inventory helps change things up, and having the reload action work without going to your inventory, like in Resident Evil, helps the pacing. There's only two options during encounters with the monsters: run, fight, and dodge, or alternatively fight and stun the monsters during animations. The monsters are roughly the same with different sounds, but different approaches in attack animations. Some of them move faster than the lock-on system. Only one seems to prefer the air, and that's the Air Screamer, who in my first few fights really intrigued me. The AI will sometimes fly away in an attempt of self-preservation. That's pretty cool. It leaves a feeling of the player impacting the world around them instead of the player being the world as events happen. Giving the AI different actions, like circling the player, really gives the encounters a unique experience. At one point, I experimented on the radio and flashlight like I did with Silent Hill 2. If you turn both off during dark sections, the monsters will have a harder time seeing the player, and thankfully the same rule applies in Silent Hill 1. An alternate tactic to save up on ammunition if the player chooses to do so. Just be sure to turn the flashlight back on if you want to read the map or pick up items.
今回システムのコンセプトに掲げたのが、普通に起こるべきことが普通に起こるっていうゲームにしようということになったんですね。いわゆるなんとかシステムみたいな、ここをこうしなければ攻略できないっていうような、そういう決めつけてしまうんじゃなくて自由度を持たせて、特にライトを今回メインに据えているんで、ライトをつけなければ行動できないけれども、ライトをつけることによって怪物に発見されやすいですとか、慌てて走り出すと、その音を怪物につけられるとか、そういう感覚的に納得できることをゲームシステムに取り入れていこうということになりました。
The puzzles aren't much to write about since they're not too different from Resident Evil's progression. Hell, you can even examine some items. The player is required to find a key to unlock something or a specific item for a solution, some of which are a bit of trial and error. Each important item is marked on the map, so there's rarely a time where there is no direction, until much later as a challenge of not getting lost. The map marks each door that the player has been able to interact with, including when the world changes and locks those doors. You'll start to see the map markings start to overlap each other. There are a few neat puzzles where you really have to think carefully. One in particular at the elementary school involving a piano really got me stuck for a while.
Damn it, Wade!
As stated before, some of the bosses are a mix of puzzles as well. One in particular requires a specific item to get the good plus ending. It's unfortunate to say that the majority of the bosses is where the gameplay turns into a bullet sponge fight. Sure, it also relies on the player's ability to position themselves away from danger, but that's pretty much it. There's not much variation in the boss fights that is synonymous to the split head fight, the last one in particular having a challenging dodge to pull off. Going back to the ending requirements, these are required by doing certain actions and explorations that are unmarked on the map. Upon a first experience, one might not think about exploring so far off, especially in 1999 when there was no internet guide. It's a neat little reward if the player is willing to explore as much as possible, though it is disappointing running up to each door when you don't know which building you can and can't go into. Still, it's a neat feature to reward the player for their exploration. Sometimes the reward ends up giving them more supplies or a bit of lore on the town. One of the endings, however, is a big chore. The player is required to go to specific locations and use a new game plus item until each area is fulfilled. Without a guide, I have no idea how anyone found out how to get the joke ending, also called the UFO ending. Granted, this ending doesn't add anything for the overall story, so it's there for fun. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to feel, alien. The story of Silent Hill is pretty simple on the surface. Most of the story is set up once the game is booted up, a visual montage of the characters in the story. A different time for the industry when it wasn't skippable logos as the game was heading straight to the main menu. A yet-to-be-named police officer drives off and takes the same route as Harry Mason and his daughter Cheryl, both of which are on vacation as Harry mentions.
You from around here? Why don't you tell me what happened?
Wait a second, I'm just a tourist. I came here for a vacation. I just got here.
The officer disappears, her vehicle being the only thing left behind, while Harry sees someone on the road, thus ending up in a crash as a result. He wakes up after being unconscious for some time. Harry, being the protagonist, sets up the motivation front and center once a new game is started. Once the player is given the controls, they are allowed a tiny bit of movement before the next cutscene plays out. Harry loses track of Cheryl and must find her. We see her off in the distance as the fog slightly obscures our view. Unfortunately, Cheryl runs off on her own. Harry follows her and heads down a dark alley. This is where the developers start to show their tricks. A puddle of blood and a tracking camera angle sets the uncomfortable tone. Once darkness takes hold with a siren going off in the distance, things start to take a dark turn.
is this? What's going on here?
This whole segment is meant to set the tone of the game's story moving forward. Pure psychological horror where nothing is certain in Silent Hill. And yet we are given enough information about how these worlds transition, the change in lighting, art direction, and that siren Silent Hill has become known for. Harry then wakes up in the company of the police officer we saw in the intro, Sybil Bennett, who apparently rescued him. If you haven't noticed yet, the dialogue is not as well acted as it could be or paced well. The huge gaps of silence in between lines of dialogue is because of the limitations in technology.
Have you seen a little girl? Just turned 7 last month, short, black hair. My daughter.
Sorry. So what do you do now?
Cheryl is my daughter. I will save her no matter what.
There's also some painfully awkward scenes that just don't work.
Hold it! Stop! Don't shoot! Wait! I'm not here to fight. My name is Harry Mason. I'm in town on vacation.
The phones are all dead, and the radio too. I'm going back to call in some reinforcements.
Wait, I have more things to say.
Go on, sorry for the interruption.
Don't mention it.
It's a shame since there's some genuinely good acting and well-written scenes in between segments of gameplay. Thankfully, the writing is not poorly written overall or full of pointless filler dialogue like, say, Kingdom Hearts.
Wait a second.
Darkness!
No!
All jokes aside, the main goal of the story stays the same throughout the game. Find and save Cheryl. Each area the player progresses through has connections in some shape or form to one Alessa Gillespie. These key locations include an elementary school, probably where she had her childhood impacted the most, and a hospital, where Alessa's story changed for the worse. Then there's an amusement park for a brief amount of time, where we can surmise Alessa having some enjoyment during her childhood. Alessa is only mentioned in bits and pieces of information until much later. The story sticks to basic details with the deeper parts of the background story hidden in props and items. Only the second half of the game starts to unravel the dark story of Silent Hill, involving a cult secretly causing events to go into motion. This includes Alessa and Cheryl's connection to the town, the key participants involved, and how each location ties into Silent Hill's current predicament. What's intriguing about the answers surrounding Silent Hill is that some answers are intended to leave things open-ended for the player's imagination, according to the guidebook. Quote, "What happened to most of the people who lived in Silent Hill? Unknown. Whatever you feel to be frightening is the truth. From the moment Harry wakes up, the town is already deserted. What specifically happened is not made clear until the end. The only thing that is certain is that this is not an ordinary situation. While it is only natural to wonder about the welfare of the people who originally lived in Silent Hill, one should be able to come up with a few explanations after completing the game. Everyone died, or what happens in the nightmare world has no effect on reality, or it was all Harry's dream, etc. Of these, the most likely explanation is that the events took place in the world of Alessa's nightmares. Silent Hill is a town where nightmares become reality, so I want those who have played the game to take the truth to be whatever each of them feels is the most frightening." Unquote. It's a simple story with layers in the background if you want to explore it, though not every answer is going to be found. Harry Mason as the protagonist isn't all that great, but he serves as a good vessel for the player in order to follow the story. There's also some good side characters, the two most important ones for the endings being Sybil and Kaufman. Sybil's a pretty likable basic character. She seems to be a spectator in the story's events, unlike Harry, who is right in the middle of it. Kaufman, on the other hand, is the most mysterious of the cast, only getting a little over the top at the last few scenes.
Ha! You're easy. And there's more where this came from.
We find out later in the story that he has a few ties to the cult in Silent Hill, essentially being a participant to the death and collapse of the town. However, the character with the most blood on their hands is Dahlia Gillespie, who often gives cryptic warnings and directions for Harry in order to manipulate him into thinking he'll find Cheryl. She does as Dahlia says, despite how strange and unhinged she appears to be.
Strength must overcome petty desire, childish sleep talk. I see it all now. Yes, everything. Hungry for sacrifice, the demon will swallow up the land. I've been expecting you. It was foretold by gyromancy.
Gyromancy is a method of divination in which a person spins around inside or walks the circumference of a circle drawn on the ground.
It is later revealed that Dahlia is the main cause of what happened to Silent Hill, creating a chain of events that led to the game's events. She apparently did a ritual, or rather a
magical spell,
after her daughter, Alessa, was injured in a house fire. The short version of what happened is this. The ritual caused Alessa's burn wounds to never heal, which made one of the nurses at the hospital uneasy, and was blackmailed so that word never got out. The ritual put on Alessa causes the town of Silent Hill to fall into the perpetual world of the Fog World and Otherworld, creating monsters and making the town deserted due to her psychic powers. That nurse I mentioned before, Harry ends up meeting her on his search for Cheryl. Her name is Lisa Garland. Lisa gives a bit of information to Harry on Silent Hill's history, briefly mentioning the cult and the past life of Silent Hill as a resort. She is easily one of the best characters in Silent Hill 1, and upon each replay, her story feels more tragic and ultimately helpless.
I don't want to be alone. It's so scary, I can't stand it.
How about coming with me? This may not be the safest place in the world either. I can't promise you anything, but I'll do my best to protect you.
No. Somehow I feel I'm not supposed to leave this place. Oh, Harry, I'm so scared. I'm cold.
The final scene of Lisa hits you like a truck, accompanied by a memorable music track emphasizing tragedy.
I get it now. Why I'm still alive even though everyone else is dead. I'm not the only one who's still walking around. I'm the same as them. I just hadn't noticed it before.
Lisa.
Stay by me, Harry. Please. I'm so scared. Help me. Save me from them. Please. Harry.
There's no character arc leading to a happy ending. It perfectly encapsulates Silent Hill's depressing story of the innocent people caught right in the middle, as the cult meddles with the supernatural. Easily the best part of Silent Hill's story. The ritual split Alessa's spirit in half, the other half going to Cheryl Mason. This would later cause Cheryl to want to return to Silent Hill, thus starting the events of the game, Alessa being the cause of the car crash in the game's introduction. During the game's events, Dahlia seeks to merge the two in order to create the god her cult worships. Harry being the most basic of motivations out of the cast keeps things simple for the player. Depending on the ending, Sybil or Kaufman will be present. 2 of the 4 endings have a different boss, with each giving Dahlia a taste of karma.
Throw one more time!
Unfortunately, the last bosses are just a color palette swap in terms of attack variation. The 2 endings that include Sybil and Kaufman are a nice reward for the player's exploration. The player will be put into a boss fight with Sybil, one of the better fights I'll add, and a creepy one at that once I found this little detail. If the player collects a specific item from the hospital, a liquid called aglaophytus, try saying that 10 times fast, they can use it on Sybil to save her and skip the fight entirely. As for Kaufman, it's a simple head to one location and explore the items he dropped in order to get the requirement. Relatively simple? With one or both of these requirements, Harry will either escape with Sybil and a child created by Alessa, roll with it, or just with said child while Kaufman is left to his fate as Lisa drags him back into the darkness. Or Harry gets the big sad and does nothing because it was all for nothing. The worst of the endings. After the credits, we're shown Harry back in the car crash from the very beginning. It has the least amount of information to dig into, so there's still some mystery to Silent Hill without looking at the sequels. Apart from the supernatural stuff, there's a fairly decent story to enjoy. It's the background details that really bring Silent Hill into the spotlight of psychological horror. Some improvements could be made, but I think what's present here is still worth playing today, as there is a unique experience just waiting to be discovered, or waiting to traumatize someone. Thank God there's a silly blooper cutscene after the credits, that really helps wind things down. This brings us to the matter of today in 2024. Silent Hill had a wide gap of no future titles for years, up until the PT demo dropped, promising a return to the series before it got cancelled by Konami. Jumping to 2022, there would be a number of announcements from Konami with the Silent Hill brand. A lot of these projects had little to no detail as to what each one was supposed to be. Nothing appeared enticing, just a lot of trailers and teasers with no gameplay to show. This included Silent Hill Ascension, Townfall, Silent Hill F, a movie, and of course the Silent Hill 2 remake. Obviously this begs the question, is the remake there just to cash in on the success Capcom has had with the Resident Evil remakes? Sadly, it really feels like it. The biggest red flag at that time is that the second game was getting a remake first, instead of the first Silent Hill, something that desperately could use an upgrade due to its tech limitations. While the fact that Silent Hill 2 is the easiest one of the franchise to profit from is present, there are bigger issues at hand. Granted, the gameplay trailer recently dropped, but that doesn't seem to have swayed any trust in Konami's favor. Trust in Konami isn't that high ever since the Silent Hills game was cancelled and the Metal Gear IP was forced to birth one of its unholy sequels. That history has not gone away. There are bound to be people that still have a negative perception of Konami. Capcom didn't jump all the way to Resident Evil 4 for a remake just because it was the easiest to profit from. They took their time and started with Resident Evil 2 in 2019. Even with its negatives, the remake for that game is still worthwhile for all the positives. I'm not even sure if it's possible for Konami to get that trust back. The damage has already been done and may be irreparable for a long time. Granted, they've brought back some cherished names in the IP, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's all smooth sailing from here. This of course depends on how well these other projects go first. So how are those going so far?
Papa? Did something happen? Oh God. Oh God.
Silence.
Oh God.
Silence.
Mama. How did it... Papa? Did you...
Acting.
Everyone's losing their futures. Slave to the system.
Now that we got the elephant in the room out of the way, the time has come to conclude. What makes Silent Hill 1 so unique? We've established the simplicity of the gameplay mechanics, creepy art direction, and music, plus the mysterious story leaving more questions than answers. As a horror title, Silent Hill 1 only ever uses a jump scare once. It never takes its genre for granted. The graphics and sound quality of the PS1 actually enhances the atmosphere, which does the heavy lifting for a horror experience. Dirty, raw, and just overall creepy. Graphics aren't everything. Silent Hill 1 is still a unique experience to go through, despite all its flaws. A simple story with simple gameplay mechanics supported by a powerful world-building set, unique approach to music and art direction. As we know of today, this kicked off a series that would inspire and influence many similar titles in the independent parts of the video game industry. It's no Silent Hill 2, that much is obvious. But this is where it all started, and it offers more connections for the rest of the franchise while its sequel sits nicely isolated as its own thing. Less is more, and this game personifies that. It's an experience like no other, and still holds up better than some horror games that came out much later. If you can experience Silent Hill 1, definitely give it a try. Even under all the fog and snow, it's clear that Silent Hill 1 is one of a kind.
の処理ですとか、とにかく全ての演出を自分たちで考えてスタンダードを作っていかなければならないということに特に苦労しました。ですね、皆さんがこれまでに味わったことないような恐怖を表現しているゲームなので、ぜひ夜電気を消してこのディスクに入っている体験版をプレイしてみてください。
Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. All sources and quotes are in the description below, whether you agree with my thoughts and takes or if you disagree. If you liked this video, click that like button. If you didn't, there's a button for that as well. Either way, I appreciate you've taken the time to listen to this video. This is Arsenal, signing off.